My name is Garrick Stein. I teach elementary school at the iShine Student Center for Springs Charter School. This is my 11th year teaching. I teach third grade now and have taught third grade for 9 years. So my best practice is utilizing centers to support quality direct instruction and small group instruction. The first thing to remember is that it's going to take time and it doesn't all have to happen at once. Getting together centers for every standard for the whole year is a large task, but it's not as bad if you take it piece by piece. Just like when you're planning out your instruction for the first few weeks of the year and you're looking at the standards you're going to cover, you're going to use that to help support your centers. So you're going to look at what's really covered and then you're going to find materials that correlate with that. The beginning of the year actually is one of the most difficult times to set up centers because they don't have a lot of the skills that you're expecting them to be able to do. So you need to kind of go backwards. You need to find skills that make them feel successful. You have to make sure that whatever you set up is something that they can be independent doing. When I'm looking for centers, I'm going to use all of the common places that we all are accustomed to looking. I'm going to look at Teachers Pay Teachers. And you would be shocked how much stuff is out there for free. Initial diagnostic information is critical. And using a multifaceted approach. We have different diagnostic tools available to us. iReady is a great one that gives you a baseline. It's not perfect, but in my experience, kids who are on level at the beginning of the year will be very close to that grade level band. If I look at the data and I track it and I realize that most students are missing a particular skill, I'll make sure I teach that in my small group, or I teach that whole group if it's most of the people, and I'll give them opportunities through centers to practice that skill. And then another piece that I think people often misunderstand is really critical formative assessment is that one-on-one interaction with kids. When I'm working with 5 kids on the rug, I get a real sense just intuitively of who's missing a skill because you can kind of sense it with them. Oftentimes, teachers take the idea of using centers too far, where they use centers to supplant instruction instead of support instruction. So for me, the idea of centers is that kids have engaging, meaningful, independent work at their level that they can do without additional support from me, allowing me to pull small groups to remediate skills that they need help with, to support instruction from that specific skill that we worked on that day. So the room environment to support centers is critical. The idea of having maybe some areas where there's a carpeted area, a rug, where kids who want to work on the floor with a clipboard can. There might be small tables. Being creative with what you have. Primary classrooms should be the model for how to institute good routines and good practice for using centers. Oftentimes, we have the false assumption that as kids get older, they're going to be more independent and they're going to be able to do things without as much instruction or as much practice. Every age group requires, kind of training to understand the expectations of the teacher. And I think that oftentimes we have to find a good balance between silence and chaos. Learning, it involves conversation. A real authentic learning environment is going to be one where kids are communicating with each other. You have to have really good routines, and so that they have a good expectation of what is acceptable noise and what is acceptable work noise. So some of the ways that I help students make good choices in the area of getting to work and appropriate noise level is that I use an accountability sheet. When I set out centers for the period of time I deem appropriate, it can be a week, it can be 2 weeks, it really is going to depend on the age group of the students, what skills you want to cover. There's a lot of things that are going to play into what choice you make in terms of how long you're going to let them work. A typical day in my room always starts with turning in the homework from the day before. Depending on the skill, I'll spot check it. We might go through a few together. If it's something that seemed pretty easy the day before, I might have them turn in and I'll look at it a little bit later. But I always like to do that. I think accountability is really important. So then I jump right into the lesson of the day. So sometimes I'll use whiteboards. Kids often like when I do that. Sometimes I'll use a math notebook. And then I usually find the distinction between the two different methods is depending on how vocabulary dependent the lesson is. If it's very vocabulary dependent, I'm gonna have them write it down because I want them to, by writing it, it's helping them remember. If it's not very vocabulary dependent, we might jump right into whiteboards because I'm gonna gain more kids buying in immediately. I try to limit it to 10 or 15 minutes of that, whole group instruction. Then I send them to do their centers. And when I mean I send them, I kind of release them to go. They grab their folder, which has their accountability sheet in it and the centers that they're working on. And because my own personal philosophy is not that they're in a little, heterogeneous or homogeneous group that they just travel around together, that they get more choice. So they're kind of traveling all around. And oftentimes, that system is going to lend itself to multi-level groupings, which I think is great because sometimes I'm working with kids, I need somebody who's really strong at this particular skill to help coach a kid who needs some support. So they get that peer assistance built in within the system. And because I'm pulling groups that are, leveled groups, I let them work all over the place. And what the great thing is that because they keep track of their own material, if they don't finish, whatever center it is, they can just pull that one out the next day. They have their own materials. They can work right up until the very last second until it's time to clean up. And while all that's going on, it allows me to pull my groups. I just start calling out names. Kids know right what to do. So if it's my group, they'll go grab a whiteboard and a marker and come join me for my small group instruction. If my ACE is calling the groups, sometimes they'll grab a pencil because she has a particular worksheet that I have set up that's supporting skill of the day. Oftentimes they'll grab their curriculum textbook that they have, and then I've given my ACE that so that she has the teacher's guide with it. When I set out centers for the period of time I deem appropriate, it can be a week, it can be 2 weeks, it really is going to depend on the age group of the students, what skills you want to cover, but I'm going to give them an accountability sheet where they need to track their own progress and they have an end goal in mind. So if they're off task, they're not going to be able to meet that goal. And it's something that you're going to have to play with as a new teacher or new to this kind of system, that it's not perfect. And again, you got to kind of release yourself to this is a growing moment for them and for you. And that sometimes I will give them too many centers and it stresses some of the kids out and they couldn't meet that goal. And other times I give too few and then I'm looking at these little eyes saying, give me more, and I might not be ready. So you got to be flexible with that. So in addition to the accountability sheet, really motivating students from within to want to finish the work. Oftentimes it means that at the end of the day, bringing all the kids together and talking about what went well and what didn't. The first couple weeks of the year, I'm not going to pull groups. I'm going to manage those centers. I'm going to manage student behaviors. I'm going to check in with students, make sure they're on task. And then it gives me a good idea after that 2-3 week period of who really is independent and who needs more structure, who needs to be checking in a couple times a day, who needs to maybe work right next to me. And then ultimately, maybe whose personalized path doesn't involve an independent, centered style of instruction where they need to maybe have a more regimented approach because they can't manage their own behavior or they can't decide. Sometimes it's something as simple as they get overwhelmed by the choice. Even though I try to manage it and make it choice within parameters where they have limited choices within each skill where they have to choose maybe 2 things out of 4, but that I need to guide them more. Sometimes it's giving them their own path where I tell them which one to do in which order. Other times it's something completely different where it might be something as simple as worksheets that are the same types of skills that the centers are supporting. My best advice for a teacher, embarking on the journey of centers for the first time is to take it piece by piece. You can't do everything at once. It does take a lot of time. Setting up the centers is time consuming, but it's worth it. And once you have it forever. Remember why you got into teaching. That you got into teaching because you wanted to make a meaningful impact in kids' lives. So centers can actually help you do that. It's a lot of legwork up front, but it allows you to work with each kid, each day, and really make the impact that they deserve.